At the border between France and the UK at Calais, in a camp nicknamed the Jungle, confrontation broke out as British and French authorities disbanded the camp by force to stop asylum seekers getting to the UK. This is all that remains of the jungle. How many people were here?
At the height of the jungle, there were roughly between 9,000 and 10,000 people.
And where have the people gone?
They spread out into the forest, they spread out into other areas around the city. In France,
here we are in spring in Calais, and it's very cold. Winter must have been incredibly cold.
The humidity, it sticks in your clothes. So if you can imagine sleeping on wet ground for weeks on end, you're not able to dry your blankets, your clothes. It's a pretty inhumane place to live.
But better in a tent here than under a bridge in Calais.
Better in a tent here because at the same time there were so many aid groups distributing food, dry blankets, clothing, cooking a hot meal, passing around hot tea. And there was also the sense of community, just making sure that people knew that they were not alone. People in this community and also on the other side of the channel did care and were willing to help. That sense of hope was the special quality of Calais, of the jungle. That sense of community and camaraderie was really part of the jungle that worked.
It is very interesting how important the possibility of hope is in the human spirit.
It keeps people going.
Yeah.
Anywhere that I've worked with MSF or everywhere that I've traveled, people can go through extremely traumatic and horrible things. But what kind of keeps them together and keeps them going is the hope for something better. But once that dissipates, everything else around it starts to crumble.
What was here?
We just walked through the main avenue with the restaurants, with the shops, with some of the different services at the main entry, which were more organized around food. There was a really large structure, a massive tent donated by some UK volunteers. It was a mosque, a very large mosque. On this side over here, there is another quite large mosque. Two different communities, but what was great was they had their spaces to gather, to try to remind them of where they came from, and to get together. The community aspect, as we were talking about before, was extremely important. That was the special thing about the jungle, is that space to share, get to know each other. That doesn't necessarily happen in a more institutionalized refugee camp as such. There's always a separation and a distance between the aid worker and the refugee. But because it was an unrecognized, dangerous space, the aid provided was not managed by the French state or army, and it was kind of a natural reaction and goodwill of citizens like you and I to come out and help.
And a lot of people from the UK, a lot of the volunteers were from the UK.
That was the interesting thing, I thought. But a lot of UK people have come out and also were quite critical of the French state and the French response, or lack of response, more ignorance to the entire problem. That's also a bit ironic because we could also say that what was going on the other side of the channel was completely ignoring the humanitarian situation in the jungle. But migrants' goal was to get over to the UK, as the UK was shutting down its borders, creating the fences along the highways over here, and trying to keep people out. There were just under 1,000 kids in the camp. The different volunteer groups would come out and bring toys, they'd bring bikes. You'd often see kids running up and down the main street, either playing with balls, riding their bike. This is where a lot of the youth center activities were set up. We were doing mental health activities, and we were providing legal information. It was one of the few safe areas for unaccompanied minors, just like the restaurant at the entrance was a space only for minors. No adults were allowed into that space. At that time, there was probably about 850 unaccompanied minors in the camp, that were evacuated when the camp was dismantled.
So look at this. The bulldozed remains of a place where kids were safe. God. The police back there, what was all that about? I couldn't follow the conversation.
So this is basically a closed down site. So anytime we enter in, we'll have a lot of different riot police come and check our papers. But quickly we entered in a conversation about exactly our work and our point of view. We were discussing about how the riot police, just as the residents of Calais, are caught in the middle of a situation. Thousands of people are running towards the northern border of France to get to the UK. But there are no long-term solutions being provided by either French or the UK governments to provide for the humanitarian situation on either side of the border.
So we're left with this. Doesn't look like a long-term solution.
It was never a solution.